You know that moment when your whole world seems to freeze? Yeah, that was me, standing there in the middle of a crowded restaurant, surrounded by friends and family, holding a glass of champagne I didn't even feel like drinking. I should have been celebrating my daughter Emily's college graduation, her big day, the one I had waited for, worried over, and cheered for my entire life. But instead, David, my husband of 28 years, decided it was the perfect time to announce he was leaving me. Can you believe that? Right there, in front of everyone. My heart literally skipped a beat, and I could feel 50 pairs of eyes burning into me, waiting for me to break down, to cry, to scream, maybe even run out of the room. And you know what? I didn't. Not even a tear, not even a sob. I just smiled. Crazy, right? But in that moment, something inside me clicked. I realized that this day, Emily's day, wasn't about him or his grand dramatic gestures. It was about my daughter, her achievement, and yes, about me too. So I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and stayed calm. I smiled at Emily, kissed her cheek, and told her, "This is your day, sweetheart. Let's enjoy it." And then, I did something David never saw coming. Let me back up a little and tell you about my family. My name's Laura. I'm 54, and for almost 3 decades I thought I had built a solid life with my husband, David. We met young, fell in love quickly, and like so many couples, promised each other forever. Over the years, I put my career dreams on hold, always telling myself someday, so that David could chase his ventures, his new ideas, and yes, his so-called passions. I was the steady one, the anchor. And then there's Emily, our daughter. She's my pride and joy, the reason I pushed through every long night and every tough season. She just graduated with honors. And if you're a parent, you know that kind of pride. It's indescribable. So picture this: a warm summer afternoon, a fancy restaurant, the air buzzing with chatter and laughter. We were surrounded by family, friends, colleagues, all gathered to celebrate Emily's huge accomplishment. I was glowing, watching her sit there with that cap still perched on her head, looking every bit the brilliant young woman I'd always believed she'd become. And then it happened. David stood up, champagne glass in hand. For a split second, I thought he was going to toast our daughter, maybe say something fatherly and heartfelt. Instead, his words cut through the room like a blade. "I've decided to start a new life without you." The clinking of silverware stopped. Conversations froze. I swear even the air in the room felt heavy. Every eye turned to me, waiting for an explosion. My daughter's face went pale, her smile erased in an instant. And me? I just sat there, my heart pounding, but my head held high. I wasn't about to give him the scene he wanted. Because what David didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment far longer than he had. The room went silent, like someone had hit a pause button on life itself. Forks hovered mid-air, glasses stopped clinking, and all that remained was this thick, suffocating stillness. I could practically feel the weight of everyone's stares pressing against my skin. My sister-in-law's jaw dropped. A couple of David's colleagues exchanged awkward glances, and poor Emily just sat frozen, her big day shattered in an instant. Inside, my stomach twisted, my chest tight, but on the outside, I forced a calm smile. That was the hardest part, pretending I wasn't breaking apart. I wanted to scream, to throw the champagne in his face, to demand why he chose this moment, of all moments. But I knew that would only feed the scene he clearly craved. And then, the whispers began. Little gasps, the shuffle of chairs, that low buzz of people trying not to be obvious while devouring the drama. It was humiliating, but strangely enough, also clarifying. In that frozen silence, I realized David had just exposed himself, not me. He was the one who looked cruel, careless, and shockingly selfish. I sat taller in my chair, adjusted my napkin, and let the room watch me choose dignity over chaos. Because if he thought he had broken me, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I took a slow, steadying breath, forcing myself to remember why I was there. This day wasn't about David or his reckless theatrics. It was about Emily, my daughter, the girl who had worked tirelessly for years to reach this moment. I could feel her trembling slightly beside me, her eyes wide and unsure, searching for some anchor in the chaos. That anchor had to be me. So I smiled, genuinely this time, and reached over to squeeze her hand. My heart was racing, a storm of anger and betrayal churning inside me, but I didn't let it spill outward. I whispered a quiet, "It's okay, sweetheart. This day is yours," and kissed the top of her head. I wanted her to know that no matter what David did, he wouldn't steal her joy. Around us, the restaurant was still frozen in shock. People were staring, some shifting uncomfortably, others whispering. I could almost hear David's satisfaction, thinking he'd humiliated me, but I stayed calm. My calmness, my dignity, became a shield, turning the moment on its head. In a strange way, it was empowering. I realized then that I didn't need to react with anger or tears to regain control. I could choose grace, and in doing so quietly, I had already won the first battle. I think back on the years, and honestly, it's exhausting just remembering all I gave up. I put my career on hold again and again, convincing myself that supporting David's ambitions was more important. 3 business ventures, 2 career changes, endless finding himself phases. I was always the steady hand, keeping us afloat while he chased one dream after another. I balanced budgets he ignored, saved for Emily's future while he risked everything on fleeting passions, and somehow kept the family together when chaos seemed inevitable. There were nights I sat alone, staring at spreadsheets and bills, wondering if I'd ever get a moment to pursue my own dreams. I had ideas, visions of a consultancy helping women navigate finances, but I told myself, someday, after David finds stability, after Emily graduates, someday. And I waited. Meanwhile, David seemed to grow bolder, brimming with charm and ambition, but often careless with consequences. He didn't see, or maybe didn't care, about the quiet sacrifices I made, the late nights and compromises that held our family together. I kept the resentment buried deep, focusing on Emily, on holding our life steady. But deep down, every time he chased another whim, I felt a little piece of my own life slip away, like sand through my fingers. While David chased one ambitious idea after another, I was the one who stayed grounded, raising Emily with patience, love, and a quiet determination. Every school project, every recital, every late-night homework session, I was there, making sure she had the stability and support her father sometimes couldn't provide. I celebrated her little victories and soothed her disappointments, always making her feel like she was the center of my world, even when mine seemed to be spinning out of control. I watched David pour himself into risky investments, charming clients one week, and abandoning ventures the next. And sometimes I felt a pang of fear. What if one of these whims failed? What if our carefully built life crumbled? But I kept my worry behind a calm smile, masking the storm inside. Emily never needed to know the anxiety gnawing at me, the sleepless nights spent balancing checkbooks while David dreamed bigger and bigger. And yet, despite the chaos, I never stopped believing in our daughter. Every day I reminded myself that she was worth every sacrifice, every deferred dream. But little did I know, the real test of my resilience was not just supporting David S. whims. It was surviving the betrayal that was quietly building right under my nose. I thought I knew everything about our life together, about David, about the family we had built. I was wrong, completely wrong. The truth hit me like a thunderclap one quiet afternoon when I noticed odd patterns, flashes of secrecy, unexplained expenses, little things that didn't add up. And then, the discovery. David had been seeing Rachel, a much younger woman, for years. My heart sank, twisted, and a part of me wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there. Rachel had been around, attending family gatherings, asking me for advice about her career, acting as if she was just another friend. And all the while, she was weaving herself into my husband's life behind my back. The betrayal stung deeper than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just the affair. It was the years of deception, the lies, the calculated distance David had put between us. I remember sitting in the living room, stunned, shaking my head, thinking, how could I have been so blind? Every shared memory, every celebration, now felt tainted by his duplicity. The man I had loved, the father of my child, had been building a secret life in parallel to ours. And in that moment, I realized that the life I thought I controlled was unraveling, piece by painful piece. After discovering the affair, I started noticing other subtle signs, small transfers from our joint accounts, charges for fancy dinners, gifts, and even what looked like deposits to unknown accounts. At first, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a mistake, I thought. But my gut wouldn't let me ignore it. I've managed our finances for over 20 years. Numbers don't lie, and these numbers were screaming. I began to dig quietly, poring over statements, cross-checking dates, and comparing accounts. Each discovery made my stomach twist tighter. Each irregularity another blow to the life I thought I had. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. David wasn't just having an affair. He was systematically siphoning funds for himself and Rachel, all while pretending to tighten our belts for Emily's future. It was infuriating, heartbreaking, and surreal all at once. How could he plan a new life while ignoring the sacrifices I had made for decades? I felt a mix of anger and resolve, a cold determination settling over me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about protecting myself, my daughter, and the life I had fought to build. And deep down, I knew I had the skills, the patience, and the strategy to turn the tables. And then it hit me, the full extent of his deception. David had been systematically transferring money into a private account, one I didn't even know existed. Every transfer, every hidden expense, every lavish gift to Rachel, or the extravagant trips they planned. It was all funded by what I had worked so hard to save. My hands shook as I scrolled through the statements, disbelief and rage twisting together in my chest. It wasn't just the money. It was the sheer audacity. He had the nerve to plot a new life while pretending to be responsible, while Emily's future depended on the very savings he was quietly draining. I felt a mix of betrayal, anger, and something colder, clarity. For years, I had been practical, precise, the one keeping everything in order. And now, all of that skill was going to serve me in ways he could never anticipate. I realized, with a strange sense of empowerment, that I wasn't powerless here. I had the knowledge, the evidence, and the means to protect myself and my daughter. Every detail he thought he had hidden became a piece of the puzzle I could use to reclaim control. And just like that, the storm inside me shifted from despair to strategy. What made the betrayal sting even more was the hypocrisy, the way he lived with two different sets of rules. While I was tightening our budget, counting every expense, and making sacrifices to ensure Emily's future, David was splurging on Rachel. Expensive dinners, designer gifts, even trips to the beach, all while insisting to me that we needed to save, that retirement required discipline, that we couldn't afford anything extra. The audacity of it left me breathless. I kept thinking, how could someone live so comfortably in their lies? How could he pretend to care about our family while funding an entirely separate life? Every credit card statement, every bank notification I discovered, felt like another punch, another revelation of just how calculated and cold his deception had been. I won't lie. It hurt, deeply. The anger burned hot, but beneath it was also a sharp clarity. I had spent decades managing our finances, understanding the ins and outs, and now I could see the trail he left. Every lavish expense, every secret transfer became evidence, not just of his affair, but of the life he thought he could build without consequences. And that realization? It sparked something inside me. A plan, precise and deliberate, to regain control and protect what truly mattered. Once I had gathered enough evidence, I knew I couldn't act impulsively. This wasn't about revenge in the heat of the moment. It was about strategy, protecting myself and Emily, and making sure the truth finally came to light. I scheduled consultations with attorneys, carefully explaining everything I had uncovered. The secret account, the lavish spending on Rachel, and the affair itself. Each meeting left me both anxious and oddly empowered, realizing that the law could be my ally where deception had once ruled. I documented everything meticulously. Screenshots of messages, copies of bank statements, dates, amounts, patterns. It all became a record that left nothing to chance. I could feel the weight of the past 28 years pressing down on me, but it was a purposeful weight, guiding my next steps rather than crushing me. Then came the divorce papers. Preparing them was a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction, because I finally had the means to reclaim my life and safeguard Emily's future. Sorrow, because this was the end of a chapter I had once believed would last forever. Every line of those documents, every attachment of evidence, was a quiet declaration. I wasn't a victim, I was a strategist, and the life I had built would not be stolen in silence. Timing was everything. I knew David would choose Emily's graduation for his grand announcement, thinking it would humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. The audacity. But instead of panicking, I leaned into strategy. Every document, every piece of evidence, every carefully prepared divorce filing had been timed to ensure that the moment he thought would break me would instead expose his own betrayal. On the day of the graduation, I arrived early, checking that everything was in order, not just for Emily, but for the moment I would regain control. I watched the guests gather, the excitement, the proud smiles, and yes, David, smug and self-assured, unaware that his carefully orchestrated drama was about to unravel spectacularly. My heart pounded, a mix of anticipation and adrenaline, but I kept my composure. This was not the time for tears or confrontation. This was the time for dignity and quiet power. As David prepared to make his declaration, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Every step he had planned, every expectation he had about my reaction was about to be turned upside down. I wasn't just going to survive his stunt. I was going to show, in front of everyone, that I had always been 3 steps ahead. The moment of reckoning was near, and I was ready. As the ceremony began winding down and guests were enjoying their champagne, I reached calmly into my handbag and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. My hands didn't shake, though my heart was pounding in my chest. This envelope wasn't just paper. It was the first step of reclaiming my life. A quiet but powerful message that the game had changed. I walked past David, pretending to adjust my seat, and gently placed it beside his plate. I could see the surprise flicker across his face, his triumphant smile faltering as he read the simple words on the front. For you, to read later. Oh, how I wished he knew exactly what it contained. But patience was part of the plan. Then I turned to Emily, who looked pale and anxious, and kissed the top of her head. Sweetheart, this day is yours. Don't let anyone take that away, I whispered. The rest of the guests, still in mild shock from David's earlier announcement, were unaware of the storm quietly waiting in that envelope. Walking out of the room, head held high, I felt a strange exhilaration. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting, I was in control. And David? Well, he had no idea the carefully laid trap he had just stepped into. I straightened my dress, smoothed my hair, and began walking toward the restaurant's exit, deliberately slow, savoring each step. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes on me, curious, shocked, some judging. But I held my composure like armor. My heart raced, but outwardly I was serene, untouchable. This was the moment to let David's own drama unfold while I remained untangled from it. Behind me, I could hear the heavy door swing open and slam shut. Then came his voice, sharp and frantic. "Laura, what is this? What have you done?" I didn't answer. I kept walking, a small, satisfied smile curling my lips. The envelope he held contained the first tangible proof of the life he thought he could secretly build. And now, every gasp and murmur from the guests reinforced my advantage. Outside, the summer air hit me like a wall, hot and liberating. I breathed it in deeply, feeling for the first time in years that I could move freely, without fear or restraint. Meanwhile, David's carefully orchestrated public display of control was crumbling spectacularly, and I wasn't even there to witness it. I had already won the first round, silently, strategically, and with dignity. When I arrived home, the familiar comfort of our house felt strangely different, tainted by the weight of what I now knew. I set my purse down and walked through the rooms slowly, each step measured. Family photos lined the walls, the antique clock ticking steadily, the couch where David and I had dreamed of our future. But everything now carried a quiet tension, a sense of betrayal lingering in the air. Upstairs in the master bedroom, I opened the closet and froze. Suitcases were stacked neatly, his clothing folded and ready, like a silent confession of the life he planned to abandon, and the one he thought he could start with Rachel. My stomach twisted, part shock, part grim satisfaction. He had been meticulous about appearances, predictable in his patterns, careless only with the things that mattered most. I pulled out my laptop and reviewed the evidence again. Bank transfers, messages, receipts, all lining up perfectly with the secret life he had tried to build. The realization was empowering. Every hidden move, every calculated deception became ammunition for the plan I had been preparing quietly, patiently, for months. The man who thought he could humiliate me had no idea that I had already won control of the narrative, and the first steps of justice were already in motion. A few hours later, I heard the familiar rumble of David's car in the driveway. My pulse quickened, but I remained calm. I had rehearsed this moment countless times in my mind, and now it was real. The front door slammed open, and there he was, face flushed, eyes wide, the envelope clutched in his hand like a lifeline. "Laura, what is the meaning of this?" His voice bounced off the walls, a mix of anger and disbelief. I stayed seated on the couch, closing my laptop slowly, letting the silence fill the room. He expected confusion, fear, maybe tears, but not composure. My heart pounded, yes, but my voice remained steady. "You really thought you could keep this from me?" I asked softly, each word deliberate. "The affair, the secret accounts, the transfers, it's all documented. I've known for months." His confident facade crumbled, and I could see the panic flicker in his eyes. The man who had tried to orchestrate his grand escape was suddenly unsure, unsteady. I didn't need to raise my voice or make threats. The truth, backed by careful planning and evidence, was more powerful than any outburst. For the first time in years, I saw David stripped of control, realizing that the life he thought he could build quietly was collapsing around him, and I was at the center of it, calm, resolute, unshakable. As I watched David's panic unfold, I knew it was time to reveal the part of the plan he had never anticipated. Slowly, I opened the envelope and slid out a copy of our prenuptial agreement. "You remember this?" I asked, my voice calm, almost gentle. His eyes flicked over it, confusion and dread mixing in a way that made my stomach tighten. Not from fear, but from anticipation. "You see, David, there's a fidelity clause. It protects me in cases of infidelity. And yes, it's still valid," I continued, letting the weight of the words sink in. His mouth opened, shut, and opened again, as if trying to find something to say. But there was nothing he could say. The document he had once insisted upon to safeguard his future had become the very thing that now safeguarded mine. Every transfer, every secret purchase, every plan to humiliate me publicly, all of it now carried consequences he hadn't foreseen. I could see the color drain from his face, the confidence that had fueled his audacious actions replaced with a dawning understanding. The house, the savings, the investments, everything he thought he could manipulate now tilted firmly in my favor. For the first time in years, the scales of our marriage, long weighed by deceit and sacrifice, had shifted, and I had orchestrated it with patience, precision, and calm resolve. With the fidelity clause revealed, I moved quickly. I contacted my attorney and ensured that our joint accounts were frozen pending the divorce proceedings. It was a surreal feeling, seeing the very money he had siphoned and splurged on Rachel now locked, inaccessible to him. The balance of power had shifted entirely, and I could feel it in every careful breath I took. David stood in the living room, pacing, desperation creeping into every gesture. I didn't flinch. I simply reviewed my notes and documents, letting him stew in the reality he had ignored for too long. Every transfer, every hidden account, every financial misstep he thought he could cover up had become a tool for me. The legal leverage was complete, and I could finally ensure that the life I had built, and Emily's future, were secure. There was a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. Vindication, because he had been exposed. Sorrow, because this chapter of our lives, filled with shared memories, was ending not with tears or reconciliation, but with calculated justice. Yet even in that, I felt power and freedom, the knowledge that for the first time in decades, I was not just surviving, I was in control. It wasn't long before the full impact of the freeze and legal measures hit David, and, by extension, his dreams with Rachel. I had discovered that he and Rachel had been planning to move into a beachfront apartment, one he thought he could secure with our joint resources. But with the accounts frozen and the legal filings in place, the lease was flagged for credit issues, and the application never went through. I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction, though I reminded myself to keep it tempered. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about justice. David had built his own fantasy, one that ignored the lives and trust of those around him. Now that fantasy crumbled before their eyes. I watched from a distance as his calls to the leasing office went unanswered. His frantic texts to Rachel met with awkward silences, and the realization settled in. The life he had schemed to create was collapsing. It was a strange mix of relief and grim satisfaction for me. I wasn't celebrating his failure for its own sake. I was protecting Emily, securing my home, and asserting the truth. The lesson was clear. Deceit and recklessness carry consequences, and the stability you take for granted can be reclaimed with strategy, patience, and courage. The day of the final hearing felt surreal. I walked into the courtroom with a steady heart, clutching my notes and evidence, but also carrying the quiet weight of nearly 3 decades of shared life. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for theatrics, reviewed the prenuptial agreement and all documented evidence carefully. When the ruling was announced, it felt like a tide turning. I kept the house, our family home where countless memories had been built. I retained the majority of our investments and my retirement accounts, the very foundation I had worked to protect, while David pursued his reckless ventures. Relief washed over me, but it wasn't giddy or triumphal. It was the deep, grounding satisfaction of justice served. David sat across the room, stunned, the reality of his choices finally settling in. The man who had thought he could humiliate me and escape with ease now understood the consequences of betrayal and deception. I felt a bittersweet clarity. The marriage I had once devoted myself to was over, yet I had reclaimed my autonomy, my security, and my dignity. As I left the courtroom, I realized that what had once felt like an insurmountable betrayal had transformed into empowerment. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, ready to build a life on my own terms. After the courtroom drama settled, I felt the need for something I hadn't allowed myself in years: comfort, understanding, and simply being seen. Karen, my sister, had always been a quiet anchor in my life, the one who noticed the small cracks I tried to hide. That evening, I drove to her cozy townhouse, my mind still buzzing from the whirlwind of legal battles, revelations, and realizations. Karen greeted me with a warm hug, and just like that, the tension I'd been holding onto for months began to melt. "You're okay?" she whispered, though I could see the mix of concern and admiration in her eyes. I laughed softly, the sound feeling strange after weeks of stress and vigilance. "Better than okay," I admitted. "I feel powerful, in a way I haven't in decades, but also exhausted." We sat in her sunlit living room, surrounded by books and plants, sipping tea as I recounted the day's events and the months leading up to it. Karen listened without judgment, offering advice only when asked, letting me process everything at my own pace. In her presence, I realized that strength didn't mean facing battles alone. Leaning on someone you trust could be its own kind of courage, and with Karen by my side, I felt ready to step into the next chapter of my life, fully grounded and supported. A few days after the graduation, Emily finally asked the questions I had long anticipated. I had shielded her from the chaos for months, wanting her to focus on finishing college without the weight of our family drama. Sitting across from her in the quiet of our kitchen, I carefully explained the truth: David's affair, the financial deception, and how I had handled everything to protect both of us. Her eyes widened at first, a mixture of shock and disbelief, but then softened as she began to understand the layers of planning and composure that had gone into every decision I had made. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I can't believe how calm you were, how you knew exactly what to do without letting anyone see you lose it. I'm so proud of you." I felt a rush of emotion, pride, relief, and a little bittersweet sorrow for the betrayal we had endured. Holding her hand, I realized that my strategy had not only preserved our security, but had also taught Emily a lesson in resilience and dignity. Even in the most painful circumstances, it's possible to act with strength, foresight, and grace. In that moment, our bond felt unbreakable, forged through both hardship and triumph. With the dust of the past settled, I finally allowed myself to focus on the future, a future I had postponed for decades while prioritizing David's ambitions. I had always dreamed of helping women navigate their finances, empowering them to make confident, independent choices. Now, with both the resources and clarity to pursue it, I launched my own financial consultancy. The first days were both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. I met women who had struggled silently with money, career decisions, and life transitions. I listened to their stories, offered guidance, and celebrated small victories with them. Each session reminded me that my own experience, the betrayals, the careful strategizing, the resilience, was a powerful tool I could share. I also mentored young professionals, especially women like Emily, helping them understand that strength is not just about endurance, but about foresight, planning, and believing in your own worth. The satisfaction of seeing someone take control of their financial future, armed with knowledge and confidence, was profound. Through this journey, I discovered a new identity, one not defined by a marriage, a husband, or betrayal, but by autonomy, expertise, and compassion. Rebuilding wasn't just about starting over. It was about thriving, making a difference, and embracing a life shaped by choice rather than circumstance. Looking back, I realized that what carried me through the most painful chapter of my life wasn't luck or timing. It was preparation, foresight, and the unwavering belief in my own strength. Betrayal has a way of shaking your world to its core, but it doesn't have to define you. I learned that you can face deception with calm clarity, gather the facts, and take deliberate steps that protect not only your present, but also your future. Every action I took, from uncovering the financial irregularities to carefully timing my response, was a choice rooted in strategy and self-respect. It wasn't about revenge for the sake of it. It was about reclaiming control over a life that had been jeopardized by someone else's recklessness. That clarity gave me power, and with power comes freedom. The freedom to rebuild, to mentor, and to guide others so they don't have to endure what I did alone. If there's one lesson I hope others take from my story, it's this: know your worth, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the impact of planning and patience. Life may throw unexpected betrayals your way, but with foresight and self-empowerment, you can turn even the darkest moments into opportunities for growth, independence, and ultimately, triumph. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the woman I was before. For nearly 3 decades, my identity was wrapped up in being a devoted wife and mother, always prioritizing David's dreams, managing the household, and guiding Emily through her own life. I took pride in those roles, of course, but they often left little room for my own ambitions. It wasn't until the betrayal forced me to reclaim my life that I began to understand who I truly could be. As I stepped into the world as an independent woman, everything shifted. I built a financial consultancy from the ground up, mentoring women, empowering them to take control of their finances, and sharing the lessons I had learned the hard way. I discovered joy in my work, in the freedom to make decisions without compromise, and in the ability to define success on my own terms. It wasn't just about career or money. It was about confidence, self-respect, and knowing that I could thrive even after heartbreak. Every challenge I faced became a testament to my resilience. I am no longer just Laura, David's wife, or Emily's mom. I am a woman who has reclaimed her identity, her power, and her life, and wow, what a feeling it is to finally live for myself. Sitting in my sunroom one evening, watching the sunset spill gold across the city, I couldn't help but feel a swirl of emotions. Relief, yes, but also a lingering ache for what might have been, for the life I thought I had with David. Sometimes, even in triumph, the heart remembers the pain. And yet, I feel stronger, wiser, and more alive than I ever have before. Life has a way of reminding you that endings aren't always clean. They're messy, complicated, and full of lessons we carry forward. I often wonder how differently things could have unfolded if honesty had been part of the equation from the start. And it makes me curious. How would you handle discovering betrayal in your life? Would you respond with strategy, emotion, or something entirely different? Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with me. If my story resonated, even a little, I'd love it if you hit like, share with someone who might relate, and subscribe for more stories and reflections like this. Your support means the world, and I hope it inspires you to trust yourself and embrace your own strength, no matter what challenges life throws your way.